Our first venture to the law school. We're going to have Cass Sunstein on, an esteemed professor, to talk about some pressing legal issues and also his relationship with his former colleague Barack Obama. Mr. Sunstein, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So one of the most pressing legal issues, I would say, is Roe v. Wade. From a strict legal perspective, many people say it's actually poorly written law. In other words, the right to privacy is not grounded in that good a law. What's your take on the exact law perspective of Roe v. Wade?
I think most people think the decision was not the most glorious moment in the Supreme Court's history in terms of legal reasoning. The court did base its decision on a right to privacy, and the Constitution doesn't refer specifically to a privacy right. The decision constructed this elaborate trimester framework, which is weakly rooted in anything in the precedent or the text. So Roe against Wade, I think, is generally viewed as understandable from the standpoint of women's equality or human liberty, understandable whether or not right, but not a careful opinion. And part of the problem that countries face since is that it didn't have a very well-grounded legal decision.
It seems like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a Supreme Court justice nominated under President Clinton, sees it more as a ruling that should be under the rule of equality, not privacy. Do you agree with more of that legal reasoning?
Yes, I agree. For one thing, the Constitution does contain an equal protection clause, and it's well established that discrimination on the basis of sex is troublesome under the equal protection clause. It's also well established as a matter of biology, that at least in this era, and not for a long time, will men be able to get pregnant. It's only women who get pregnant. So if you have a law that imposes a burden on one sex alone, then the government should have to come up with a very powerful justification for the burden. So to base this decision on the equality right makes a little more constitutional sense than to base it on the privacy right.
What kind of possibility do you think it is that this will become a states' rights issue?
Depends on who the next president is. I'm clear that Justice Thomas and Justice Scalia would want to overrule Roe against Wade.
Same with Alito.
Well, it's not clear with Alito and Roberts. They're interesting thinkers in terms of the abortion right because they're very conservative in the sense that they don't think that the court should be creating privacy rights. That's a particular form of conservative constitutional thought, and that suggests they'd be very skeptical about Roe against Wade. But they might be conservative in the sense that they respect stare decisis. So
Legal precedent, in other words?
Legal precedent. The idea of overruling Roe against Wade, throwing this issue to the states, would be a pretty radical move in the sense of a big alteration of what's been true in the United States for many decades. And whether conservatives of the sort that they are will want to make that radical move remains to be decided. I wouldn't want to predict what Roberts and Scalia would want to do on Roe against Wade, but it wouldn't be at all surprising or stunning if they voted to overrule it. And that would mean we'd have a 5-4 split on the current court, with Justice Kennedy not terribly enthusiastic about Roe against Wade, but not willing to overrule it. He's willing to limit its reach. And that suggests everything would depend on the next election.
We just alluded to Justice Roberts and Justice Alito, the latest two additions to the Supreme Court. Let's focus on them. What was your take on Roberts? Did you think he was a good pick? Because a lot of moderates, slightly conservative people seem to be satisfied with him, but then they say he's disappointed them once he's gotten to the bench. Do you agree with that?
Well, I like the Roberts appointment for a couple of reasons. He's extremely able. He's one of the best advocates of his generation and is very experienced. So he didn't have a steep learning curve. He knew a lot about the court and constitutional law going in, and he has an absolutely first-rate mind. Also, people who know him like him. I know him a little bit, and I like him. So to have someone who's a good person, who's exceptionally able, that's really wonderful that is the Chief Justice. Also, I read basically all his opinions on the Court of Appeals, and he struck me as a lawyer's lawyer, not as an ideologue's judge. And so he didn't seem very ideological. And I supported the appointment and was excited about it. I have been disappointed by him in his short period on the Supreme Court so far. He's been quite ideological in his votes. He has been, in terms of ability, fine, but not outstanding. His Supreme Court opinions have been less impressive, actually, than his Court of Appeals opinions. They've shown a kind of tight ideological quality that I really didn't expect of Roberts, and it's a puzzle. Now, he's been on the court a short time. One, I think, mark of a great or even a very good judge is a degree of unpredictability, where the creativity of the mind, meaning the ability to see all sides, not the ability to make things up. Creativity and the ability to see all sides will move the great judge or even the very good judge in unexpected directions some of the time, and will show a kind of openness. And I haven't seen this with Chief Justice Roberts, and I confess to being quite surprised as well as disappointed.
I don't know if you read it, but in Jeffrey Toobin's latest book on the Supreme Court, he actually says there was some evidence of this in the 80s with memos under the Reagan administration that seemed to be pretty partisan. Did you ever read about those memos or what he brought up during the confirmation process?
Yes, not only did I read about those memos, I read those memos themselves, the Roberts memos. And I was actually in the Justice Department with Roberts at the time, so that's an era I know well. And he was a certain type, that is, an excellent young lawyer who was, in certain respects, a Reaganite, that is, who had a certain ideological approach to the law. And there were a lot of young people like that, just as there were young people who were liberal then.
And people change.
And people change, and they mature, and they see more sides. So I didn't think that his confirmation should be derailed because of things he'd done in his early 30s and late 20s.
And did you always know that Justice Alito, or did you always think he was a fierce ideologue before he even got nominated, or were you also willing to hear him out and thought he could have been a good confirmation?
Well, Alito I was more skeptical of. I wouldn't describe him as a fierce ideologue. I describe him as as someone who has strong ideological positions that play a very large role in his ultimate votes. And Alito is also an excellent person and an excellent judge. So that's in terms of just sheer ability. So that's very good. Points to President Bush for appointing two people who really know what they're doing. On the other hand, with Alito, I did read all his dissenting opinions, and he was always dissenting from the right, even when the other two judges on a three-judge panel were conservative Republican appointees. He thought they weren't conservative enough. So what disappointed me about Alito was that he seemed, in his votes, very, very ideological. Not going along with conservative colleagues, thinking that they were themselves too liberal. The reason I resist the word fierce for Alito is he's an even-tempered person. He's civil. He doesn't accuse anybody of anything. He's not thundering, but his lower court opinions were much more ideological and in some ways, I think, political than Roberts, and that bothered me, and I think many others at the time he was appointed. And I do say, that if you have two such highly qualified people, you would hope that they will be real judges and not people who are, by their voting patterns, quite political. But if you look at their voting patterns today, these are very political.